Namaste everyone. Please welcome to this seminar series of Indic Studies Toronto. Today our topic is academia and Hinduphobia, and we are going to talk about recent global events. Our speaker is Pushpita Prasad, who is a storyteller and communications professional with a background in media, technology and history. She is passionate about topics related to India, Hinduism and human rights. Pushpita is part of the National Steering Committee of CoHNA and believes in the power of grassroots advocacy activism in the community. So we'll have about 30 to 45 minutes of presentation and then about 30 minutes of questions and answers. So welcome Pushpita ji, and please continue.
Thank you all. Namaste, and thank you for having me here and for that wonderful introduction. So I'm very excited to be here today. And the topic we're going to talk about is also very interesting. We wish there wasn't a topic like this, but unfortunately, this is the reality of the world we are. Quick background, I'm part of a group, as Samaji mentioned, called CoHNA, which stands for Coalition of Hindus of North America, which basically covers the United States and Canada. So we are very focused on trying to advocate for Hindu Americans, basically at the community level, in our schools, with governments, whatever, and giving a voice to Hindu Americans. And we are basically a volunteer-run group. We've been around for just about over a year and a half. And we're very proud of some of the things we've done. We've handled everything from trying to take on bills that were making the swastikas into a hate symbol, taking on CAA, trying to educate people on CAA, caste, Hindu festivals, what is required in school, and a bunch of other things. So today's topic, we're going to talk about Hinduphobia. I'm going to share some slides. And, as you said, we'll save questions for the end because there's a fair number of slides to get through. There's a lot of slides, but most of them we'll go through pretty quickly. So I'm going to share my screen and we can go from there. Can everybody see my slides?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So Hinduphobia. I wanted to start with just first a quick context of what this term even means, and then we'll get into the academic world of it. So it's actually a modern name for a pretty old practice. And there's a lot of times people tell us, oh, it's a new thing. It's been made up by the BJP IT cell or the Hindutva folks or whatever. Interestingly enough, there's a researcher, Sarah Lewis Gates, who actually published a paper on this in the late 1990s, which showed that the term Hinduphobia was being used as far back as the late 18th century. And I have linked to her article here below, but you can look at it, and they're actually snapshots from publications in 1883, even 1863. And so you can see that the term is pretty old and the practice is even older than that. So let's look at some of the right here in the Americas. This is articles, a lot of us get horrified when we see some of the coverage about our faith and our countries, but it's not new. You can see some pretty old coverage here from 1907, from 1811, from 1906. It's all old, outdated types, but the language and the way they describe the faith and the festivals and the rituals sounds very familiar. So again, don't let anybody tell us that Hinduphobia is a new made-up word by right-wing activists, because it's been around for a while. It's some more articles here. We see Oriental mystics are gathering in force for an invasion of America. There is this threat of this weird outside type of race with its weird practices that are going to come over and take over the country. The heathen invasion. The Ogden Standard, a bunch of local newspapers. There's a lot more. And I would actually suggest that those who are interested in this can follow this Twitter handle called Hindu History. The interesting part is at the turn of the century, all Indians were called Hindus. And that is why this Twitter handle has taken up this spelling. It's a fascinating handle. I would highly recommend everybody check it out. But he does a great job of going and looking at old publications, which you can find in most of the Library of Congress and places like that, and digging out gems, some of which we've featured here. So let's start with what is Hinduphobia? How should we think about it today? And what I have here is a definition that was given, that was defined recently. So in April of 2021, the Rutgers Student Union and some academics held a day-long conference on Hinduphobia. They had a number of academic speakers, and at the end of the day, they passed a resolution, which was approved also by the Rutgers Student Union, which basically defined Hinduphobia. And so let's look at the words really carefully. Hinduphobia is a set of antagonistic, destructive, and derogatory attitudes and behaviors towards Sanatan Dharma or Hinduism and Hindus that may manifest as prejudice, fear, or hatred. And the rhetoric, and then it goes on to explain what the rhetoric could cover. What, when you talk about the faith as a rigid, oppressive tradition, when you analyze certain aspects of it and project it onto the whole community, when you stereotype certain practices, when you demonize things that you don't understand. And it can be everything from genocide to really small day-to-day microaggressions. So I think it's a very broad term, and it behooves all of us to kind of understand the term and really start using it, because understanding and using these terms is a very important tradition, is a very important step in starting to get our voices heard in a coherent fashion. Now, sometimes even recognizing Hinduphobia can be hard because it is so mainstreamed. I think we would all recognize if somebody came to us in the subway station and attacked us saying, "Oh, you dirty Hindu" or something, we would recognize that as Hinduphobia. However, there are a lot of smaller microaggressions and smaller issues that are so common that a lot of us, I bet you, wouldn't recognize it as Hinduphobia. So the website also calls out a bunch of different examples that should really, and I think now when we look at this list, it's not comprehensive, but it starts to help you think of what all can be considered under the umbrella of Hinduphobia and why we should realize how omnipresent it is. Obviously, like I said, if somebody's calling for killing or hurting you on the basis of Hinduism, most people would recognize that as Hinduphobia. But there's also other issues, such as, and I think this, when you project the problems of a certain society, and India certainly has a lot of problems like every other country, but especially being a poor and resource deprived country, there's a lot of problems that happen. The Hinduphobia comes into play when you take what is a social or a political conflict and start attributing some spiritual sanction to it, or saying this is actually a result of Hinduism. When you take inequities in society, again, India is mentioned here because that is our historic homeland, and start again binding them with Hinduism, that is Hinduphobia. When you make unsubstantiated claims about the political agendas of people who speak for Hinduism, and I think everybody here is probably guilty of it, we are all targeted as Hindutva, right-wing, fascist, etc. So that is a form of Hinduphobia. Denying the persecution of Hindus, a very, very common problem in today's world, unfortunately. That is, again, a form of Hinduphobia, and one that is extremely prevalent in places that really should know better. So it's a long list. I won't go through it. You can look at the website and go through it yourself. But I think when you start to look at this list, it would be interesting for you to think about your own life and your own experiences and realize think about how many Hindu-phobic experiences you may have had in your own life without even realizing it. So let's start, this is, again, may not be new information, but let's look at Hinduphobia in the media. It's a lot. And here's just a few from just the last few months. If we wanted to, we could keep going back and we would be here talking for like a day, just talking about Hinduphobia in media. I have a colleague who actually studies media studies, and this is pretty much a lot of work is just analyzing how the media treats the voices of Hindus versus other religions. But you see some examples here. There was a controversy regarding labor practices around a temple in New Jersey recently. Very bad. We hope the conflict is resolved and the temple comes out in the clear. But there was an immediate conflation of the problems that one temple might find itself to basically tarring all temples as guilty and using temple. People actually said Temple of Doom. And this is a mainstream publication calling it Temple of Doom. The reference obviously being to the infamous Indiana Jones movie which is another form of Hinduism, a Hinduphobia, and had tarred Hinduism all the way back then. And unfortunately, as you can see here, Hinduphobia comes from people with Hindu sounding names as well. And you'll find a lot of Hinduphobia in Indian media written by people who say they are Hindus as well. There's a famous quote here, a tweet here from Farkan Khan, who was the India correspondent for NPR, National Public Radio, which is a publicly funded broadcasting platform and normally seen as a very liberal and space haven for people who face persecution, people of color, people of minorities. So really shocking when you see somebody from NPR having the kind of tweet that she put out. And if anybody has forgotten the context, this was just months after the Pulwama bombing, which had killed many Indian soldiers. And the Pulwama bomber had pretty much made very similar remarks about blowing up people who drink cow piss and worship dung. So so I think we don't have to go into detail on all of these, but just a few snapshots that illustrate how omnipresent it is in all the mainstream channels. We're not looking at niche channels here or YouTube or podcasts that would keep us here for a whole month. So, but let's not forget, Hinduphobia begins early. What we have here is snapshots of textbooks in mostly 6th, 7th, or 8th, depending on how the school system runs. So this is what you learn if your child goes to school, and at least in the United States. I'm not so sure what the situation in Canada is, if it's better or not. But these are actual textbooks. California had its own version, and the community in California fought a long battle to get some of the most egregious issues removed. That process is still going on, but you will find versions of these textbooks everywhere. And not only are children taught, and all children, right? So it's not just children of Indian or South Asian descent, but every child growing up in America is taught that Hinduism is connected to the caste system. There is this pyramid that everyone is, all 1.2 billion Hindus are part of, and you're irretrievably bound there no matter what you do. It's interesting that this pyramid is so common that most of us believe it is part of our text, when actually this pyramid or hierarchy is not found in any Hindu text. And one of my colleagues at CoHNA a few months ago had written an article about how it was very traumatic for her when her son was exposed to this pyramid, because they were being shown as at the bottom of the pyramid, which she highly objected to, saying that, you know, my gurus, my shastras, my text, my community has never told me I'm at the bottom of any pyramid. And that's what I've told my son. But my own teachings are being contradicted by the school, and it leaves her as in a very difficult position as a parent to deal with. Hindu students are actually asked questions in class about what their caste is. They're asked to explain caste. These are all examples of Hinduphobia. So let's not be surprised when our children grow up and they don't really know how to talk about this issue, or they internalize a lot of this stuff. And really, Hinduphobia can target anybody. There is no escape. So, you know, imagine you are a student, you are really proud, you've landed an internship in NASA, the dream of many kids who pursue the STEM field. And like a lot of companies, you get featured as an intern, your office asks you for a picture. In the last year, as we all know, everybody's been working in their home office. So you send a picture of your home office. NASA puts out a beautiful tweet that talks about the diversity of its intern program. Diversity has been a big topic in the United States for the last year. And you don't expect much of it, but this is what happens. Who is one of the first people to call out this tweet and its diversity? Unfortunately, this is an academic. He is a professor in a leading Swedish university, a very highly decorated academic. And he is with a vast social media following. And Ashok Swain is one of the early ones to react to this very innocuous tweet from NASA, calling out the young Hindu intern who had proudly shared a picture of herself in her workplace, her home office, by the way. And then his tweet basically set off a whole flood of tweets from his followers. And I mean, we just put a sampling. It went on for pretty much 24 hours, where this young girl had to face all kinds of hate speech and abuses and slurs, simply because she had shared a picture of herself with some devis on her desk. So I can just, I'll leave you guys for a second to look at the pictures or look at the comments. But you can see a few problems right here. In addition to the immediate hate against Murtis, there is a lot of conflation. There's a lot of assumptions that she's Indian, but she's not. A lot in an immediate connection to the terrorist Indian state being right-wing. So it's very interesting that an innocuous picture of yourself at your desk could create so much assumptions that she is right-wing. Assumptions that she's Indian, assumptions that, you know, showing these kind of pictures is now going to impact the Mars program or downgrade NASA's research capabilities. The caste angle comes in, Adivasis, tribals, I mean, literally everything you could think of is thrown at this girl. I think most of us are familiar with Audrey Trutchke. She has again been guilty of almost everything. If you think back to the first slide, what we defined as Hinduphobia, really taking cherry picking texts and conflating them with a lot of stuff that is going on in India. So when a gang rape happens, which is a horrible, a gang rape is absolutely to be condemned. And I think the Indian state was persecuting the people in question. However, Audrey Trutchke, who happens to be an associate professor at Rutgers, basically starts to tie this to the Mahabharata and to the infamous incident of Draupadi's dishonoring in the Mahasabha, in the Mahabharata episode. She has also gone on to accuse the Bhagavad Gita of rationalizing mass slaughter. In one of the more famous incidents or infamous incidents, she actually tweeted that she actually put words in Sita's mouth and said that Sita was accusing Ram of being a misogynistic pig. When questioned as to where she got this data, she said she was getting it from the Valmiki Ramayana. When pressed for the source, like the exact verse, etc., she backtracked and said, okay, you know, this was not the Valmiki Ramayana. It was from a very well-respected English translation. And then, unfortunately for her, the professor who had written that translation, he's in Berkeley, he responded to a user saying, no, my translation had no such words. I said that Sita was distraught, and I do say some words, but nothing that talks about being misogynistic, no such strong language like that. But this is what we can expect in the academia. This is what our children face when they go to colleges. And she's not isolated, unfortunately. And again, to the point that people of Hindu origin can also be extremely Hinduphobic. So Priyamvada Gopal is a professor in UK, and unfortunately has been very publicly vitriolic against the faith. And as a result, has had the university stand by her. She was not censured for this. She had complete support of her university for doing this. This was their reaction to the incident I had mentioned earlier, when the Rutgers student body had passed the resolution recognizing Hinduphobia as a result of work being done by on-campus student groups that, such as Hindus on Campus, Hindu Students Council, etc. So instead of getting support from professors, they actually attracted a lot of vitriol and hate simply for asking their places of education to recognize that they do face trauma and they do get stereotyped because of their Hindu faith. I'm again just going to look at this for a second. Suraj Yangde is a scholar in Harvard, and he is basically equating all Hindu temples to monuments of Dalit slavery. He has basically recently tweeted in March that, can one be a Hindu without torturing Dalits, Muslims, and Christians? Again, you see a lot of tweets about the Baps temple that is under investigation for labor issue, but the conflation of the problems of one temple onto Hinduism incomplete. So it's important to think about what's happening here, because I don't think there is any faith or any group that can say that they're absolutely crime-free, where nobody has ever done anything wrong. Which is why it is so problematic when you take the acts of an individual or a group of a certain origin and say that's Hinduism in whole. The best example is if anybody tried to say that Islam was responsible for terror, they very rightly get shut down, even though a lot of terrorist acts are covered by people of the Islamic faith. But however, you can see the same academics using scattered incident to basically say Hinduism is at fault when there is a labor issue, when there is a violence against women, etc., whatever the case may be. So a few more things, and since the slides will be shared, you guys can look at them at your leisure. You start to see the conflation between various pet theories of the far left, and using all of those as a stick to beat the Hindu faith, concepts of Hinduism, teachings, sacred texts, festivals. Really, nothing is safe. But Hinduphobia doesn't stop at the academics. There's a whole bunch of groups that then helps further it. So even if you are thinking that you've graduated from college, you can leave all of this behind. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. And on college campuses itself, there are a lot of groups that amplify the hate that comes from the professors and other parts. So many of you might have heard about these groups. They work under many different ideologies, many different names, they take many different names. But you can start to see again the conflation. Even if they are protesting certain political issues, there is an immediate linkage of Indian political issues to Hinduism, as though Hindus are not to be found anywhere in India, as though India is a Hindu Rashtra. It's really interesting how Indian politics is used to beat Hinduism, given that Hindu law is not the law of India. Yet the two are conflated when it suits them, and we are reminded that India is a secular country when it suits them as well. I think I'd particularly draw attention to the symbol at the bottom left hand of the screen, where you start to see even taking over. We know the swastika has been commandeered and taken over for several decades ago as part of the Nazi movement, but you start to see the conflation of even the sacred Om symbol now, trying to really use it in a way that ties it to the same horror around the Nazi swastika, Hindutva, a lot of issues with this whole slide you can see right there. Cow piss and veneration for cow is a major facet of Hinduphobia, and it shows up everywhere. We showed you tweets from the media. We're showing you tweets. It shows up among academics as well, and a lot of groups. It's almost a favorite stick to beat Hindus no matter where, and it needs to be really recognized as Hinduphobia and called out. If you think your festivals are safe, they're not safe either. So every major Hindu festival is targeted in one way or another. In 2020, a whole group was formed called Students Against Hindutva that came together with groups like Equality Labs that are again openly derogatory of Hinduism, focused on dismantling Hinduism. So these groups came together and tried to say that Hinduism was not the fun festival of color and joy that we all know. It's actually a festival that is frightening and turbulent. It's an attack on women. All kinds of just absolute falsehoods were published, saying that, balloons are thrown filled with rocks, even semen at women who are walking in the street, and a conflation with the burning of Holika to talk about casteism. So in this rendition of Holika becomes a Dalit woman, and the burning of Holika is the symbol of Brahminical patriarchy and violence against women. And I think it's interesting how firmly the narrative is whitewashed, that we don't even stop to think of the logic of this story, the story that is being told. I mean, I'm not going to argue about the background of who Holika was, whether she was Brahmin or Dalit. Even if we take them at their word and agree that she was Dalit, at the end of the day, this was a conflict between a father, his son, and his sister who was trying to help him kill his son. So I fail to understand how casteism comes into this at all, since these are about the three most closely blood relatives that you can have. And so if there is a caste angle, they're all the same caste. And so again, how does casteism come in? But it's an example of how, since Hindus are not able to control their own narrative, even the most sacred and commonly known traditions and festivals can be twisted and turned back on us. So that was a lot of background and history. And so we'll pivot now into something that I think has been keeping got the whole community on edge for the last couple of weeks, and talk a little bit about the latest and one of the biggest salvos in this war against Hinduism from academia. So let's look at some background. On August 14th, an anonymous group announced that they were holding something called the Dismantling Global Hindutva Conference. There was a website that went live. They had a Twitter handle, they had social media handles, and they launched an Eventbrite registration. The conference is supposed to highlight the horrors of Hindutva and connects it to white supremacy, fascism, casteism, Brahminical patriarchy, all the buzzwords you can think of. And unlike previous efforts, which had sort of focused on Hindutva as being a problem within India, this one quite specifically targets the Hindu diaspora, specifically calling out the Hindu diaspora in the US, Canada, UK, and basically saying the diaspora, despite being a micro minority in the countries they live in, are guilty of all of the above. And you can see some of the language around it. So what is really important to remember is the timing of this conference. It's a 3-day conference that will happen between September 10th to 12th, very strategically overlapping the 20th anniversary of the September 11th. And I think that is a really important point to remember. It's not a coincidence that they ended up picking that date. There's a very deliberate reason to pick that date. And the goals of the conference organizers are outright bigoted. They're basically wanting to develop resources for anti-Hindutva pedagogy to make sure that Hindus do not have a safe space or cannot feel at home in an education or cultural institution, no matter where they are. And basically paint any Hindu who wishes to be visibly Hindu, who wishes to speak for Hinduism, wishes to advocate for Hinduism, is going to be targeted as Hindu extremist. The impact is quite clear. We're already seeing a lot of younger Hindus who do not identify as Hindus, but this is to further guilt them, shame them regarding their heritage, and suppress their intergenerational trauma, and to ensure that a Hindu can just not feel proud of his or her Hindu identity. The materials here, if you look at this was the poster that went viral, Dismantling Global Hindutva, the timing, but look at the poster here, the very virulent, the very violent picture shown here of basically plucking somebody out from the roots. And there's a lot of conflation here of Hindutva, RSS, etc. But the imagery is very stark and brings to mind nothing more than some of the Nazi imagery that we saw in the run-up to World War II and the Holocaust that followed. So if anybody thinks this is a benign group that is really wanting to tackle things at a political level, do remember what happened back in the 1940s when the Jews were similarly targeted for being rich, for being educated, for having a voice. Very similar themes that we start to see. So why is this conference a problem, right? The conference organizers are defending themselves, saying that they are dedicated to free speech. They talk about politics and political issues all the time, and there should be really no problem. Well, as we talked about earlier, this conference disproportionately singles out Hindus and falsely portrays them as extremists, and it denies the genocide of Hindus. I mean, basically, this conference and all the speakers there go on to say that Hinduphobia is a made-up term because Hindus have not really faced violence at the rate at which Muslims or Jews do. First of all, we didn't realize there was a competition. There was a stakes that you could only Hinduphobia could only be recognized if it was the absolute worst in terms of the victim or the body count. But even if we were to believe their own statement, they are quite conveniently ignoring the Bengali Hindu genocide, which, by the way, we are celebrating the 50th year of. 1971 saw the death of millions of Hindus in what is now Bangladesh, and the rape of lakhs of women for being Hindu. And no less a person than Robert Kennedy, a liberal icon, talked about the horrible violence that Hindus faced back then simply for being Hindu. There were shops that were asked to paint themselves with the letter H. Troops used to search passing by men and used to check their genitals to check what religion they were before either sending them on their way or massacring them. So for the August academics to say that there has not been a Hindu body count is a lie in itself, but they get away with it. And then we can even look at other issues such as the ongoing repression of Hindus in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, Afghanistan now became a land that has been completely cleansed of its Hindu and Buddhist heritage. Yet these august academics will say that Hinduphobia is a made-up term because there is no violence against Hindus at the scale that we see against the Muslim faith or the Jewish faith, etc. So basically, endorsing this conference is endorsing the denial of genocide against a religious minority. And let's not forget, Hindus are a religious minority across the globe, and in most of the countries they live in, aside from India and Nepal. Everywhere else, Hindus are a minority, and globally we are a minority. Just sharing a quick snapshot of the Hindutva. I think I just wanted to go back here. One of the things that the conference talks about a lot is the Hindutva Harassment Guide, which is something they put out on early July. This was put out by a collection called South Asia Association. And they basically put out what they say is an academic guide to make sure that if you as an academic or a student fighting against Hindutva get targeted, how you should respond. It's a very well thought out, very comprehensive, and it's another great way to make sure that any Hindu student who wants to talk about the harassment they face as a practicing Hindu on campus will get targeted and silenced. This is their website on the top. Here at CoHNA, we actually put out a rebuttal to the Hindutva manual back in July, and I would encourage everyone to go look at it. It's very detailed, so it's hard to go over in a webinar of this scope, but I would encourage everybody to take a look at the website that they put out, their Hindutva Harassment Field Manual, and our rebuttal, Crying Hindutva, to that one. So going back to the conference, the Global Hindutva Conference that we were discussing, why is it a problem? Some other issues. Hinduphobia is coined by the Hindu right to act as a smokescreen for casteism and anti-Muslim prejudice. Again, we fail to see what the slaughter of millions in Bangladesh has to do with casteism or anti-Muslim, what the kidnapping of girls on an ongoing basis in Pakistan has to do with being anti-casteist or anti-Muslim. And basically, why Hindus are one of the few communities that are denied a space to even discuss the hurt that they have undergone. Who are the speakers at this event? So Kavita Krishnan, a Politburo member of the Communist Party in India, she is one of the speakers here. And interestingly enough, she is presented as a key opposition leader. I don't think the lady has won an election in her life, but she shows up as a key opposition leader. She is supporting the violent Naxalite movement in India, which, by the way, the US state government recognizes as a terror group. And again, the conflation of religion with everything, any random incident that happens. In 2015, she actually dragged Hinduism and blamed Raksha Bandhan for an incident that was between a sister, between a Muslim family, when two Muslim men beheaded their sister because of a relationship she had with somebody. Even a crime in a Muslim family was somehow attributed to the Hindu festival of Raksha Bandhan by Ms. Krishnan. Nandini Sundar is another professor at Delhi University who has been named as the key link between violent Maoist leaders and their urban sympathizers by a Pandu, a Naxalite who is now in custody and is giving a lot of data on how these connections work. This is another group that has been recognized as a terror group by the US State Department. Yet these are the people who the conference is bringing to speak to dismantle global Hinduism on the anniversary of 9/11. I think we just talked about Nandini Sundar. Anand Patwardhan has an old history of bashing Hinduism. He had many years ago, way before the Modi era, for those of you who think this is part of a Modi conspiracy, this has nothing to do with Modi and RSS. His movie about We Are Not Your Monkey falsely draws an analogy between the Vanars of the Ramayana and lower caste Dalits. And the way this film was made, the filmmaker himself notes that he really wants to make sure that when you watch this movie, you get nauseated all the, we have all grown up with stories of the Ramayana, Mahabharata. It's one of the most picturized stories in our culture, and most of us derive a lot of enjoyment from it. So this is again tackling everything that is good about Hinduism, everything that gives us pleasure, gives us solace. They are attacking and trying to subvert it so that next time you watch it, you are not going to have the same feeling of peace or contentment that you got from it earlier. Just like if you go to a Hindu temple, they want you to think about them as temples to slavery, not temples to a Devi, Devta, or some other power to be. Meena Kandaswamy, she's been in the news quite a bit, but she again has written poems that are extremely Hinduphobic. We've put some snapshots here. And she has also recently tweeted that what's the quickest way to understand the Taliban? They're more or less the equivalent of RSS. Her tweet was on August 16th, a day after Kabul fell to the Taliban, and everyone has seen the horror that has ensued in Afghanistan as a result. Another speaker, Neha Dikshit, has tried to tie the tragedy that happened in India in April and May over COVID and the vast number of COVID deaths, tying the COVID deaths to and the bodies floating in the Ganga to the Brahmanical oppression, to Hinduism's problem. P. Shivakami has basically said Hinduism needs to be erased and it's spiritual fascism. We could go on, there's a lot more. But I think the bottom line of sharing these snapshots is, are they attacking Hindutva or are they attacking Hinduism? Every viewer can decide for themselves. But we like to just say, put what the speakers have said for themselves. So when we showed this tweet from Meena Kandaswamy, one of the biggest problems with hosting this conference on 9/11, there is a very clear attempt here to muddy the narrative of terror and to somehow tie Hindutva, Hinduism into the terror of 9/11. Now, many of us were around when the attack happens and think that's a ridiculous thing. Nobody could possibly believe Hinduism or Hindutva had anything to do with it. However, there's a whole generation that has now been born and has become young adults that is now in college or high school that has no personal memory of the horror of 9/11. They will read the anniversary stories that come out. There'll be a slew of stories that come out after the 20th anniversary covering the 9/11 anniversary. A lot of these academics and speakers are very well platformed. They are very often quoted in mainstream media. And I fully expect that there will be quotes that somehow talk about how the Taliban or the Al-Qaeda is the equivalent of RSS or Hindutva organizations, or the Deobandi school of thought, which gave rise to the Taliban, has some tie into India. And this is a very subtle process. So that over the next 5-10 years, there'll be a bunch of articles coming out that reference 9/11 and global terror with Hindutva. So that the next generation that grows up reading these articles will think that there is surely some connection, because this whole August pantheon of academics could surely not be wrong. And people don't dig or think that much. Most of us absorb a story at its face value when it comes from a so-called reputed vehicle like the mainstream media or a mainstream academic venue. And what are the consequences of Hinduphobia? A lot of us feel, well, it doesn't matter, we are rich, we're doing well, we are well educated, we have some CEOs, Indians are so well placed, this is all stuff, let them, I think it's a big mistake that the community is making by constantly talking about how well it's done. A few Sundar Pichais don't protect a Joe Schmo student in high school, in middle school, in college, being targeted for his or her faith or practices. They undergo trauma, and that trauma lives with them for life. I have done presentations with a mid girl who is now in just graduated college, but she still talks with pain of being in that middle school class when her teacher asked her to what her caste was and asked her to explain the caste system and her place in the pyramid. And that was, I think, 8 years ago. And it's still, you can hear the pain in her voice when she describes that incident. This sort of stuff doesn't go away. We're seeing an increasing number of silencing Hindu students. There are two handles I would suggest everybody check out. There's one called Hindus on Campus. That's a social media handle. There are groups, Hindu Students Council is an active one. Students are now trying to be vocal and sharing the pain that they face when their professors and their peers subject them to these kind of hateful comments and crimes. However, this whole conference basically says, no, your pain doesn't exist. You're making it up. If you talk about being hurt, you are an agent of Modi or fascist or some other kind of trope. So what do? We've talked a lot about the problem. So let's see what is it that we can do. I think there is no, there are some short-term actions, and many people there has been an overwhelming reaction from the group, from our community. There have been a lot of emails, petitions signed. CoHNA itself had set up a big campaign, and just our own community, our own group, our own email has resulted in about 2.3 million emails being sent so far to the 40 plus universities that are sponsoring this. And of course, there are other organizations that have sent emails as well. So I think that part has been done, could continue to be done. But we now need to do some more stuff. We need to react as an organizations too. So whether it's a temple, whether you are a bhajan group, whether you're a Bharatnatyam school, a dance group, a hotel group, a tutors group, whatever, you need to register your protest as an organization, because there is now an attempt to take some select so-called Hindu groups and add them to this global Hindutva panel, basically saying, oh, look, here's a group of Hindus who completely agree with what they are. So we need to show that if they have a small minority number of groups showing up saying they agree with this conference, we need to show in numbers that there are hundreds or thousands of normal day-to-day community groups, Hindu groups, language groups, regional groups that absolutely do not agree and absolutely vehemently protest against this global Hindutva conference. Email lawmakers. So on Friday, just yesterday, we launched another email, not at the universities, but this one is targeting the congressional. This is right now for the US. We will be launching a Canada version as well. But if you click this email, you can put your zip code, it finds your lawmakers, and it will send your lawmakers, your senators, your congresspeople, your state senators, an email asking them to take this issue up. Now, we know there is freedom of speech. There's the First Amendment. We are not against First Amendment. We're not against freedom of speech. We thoroughly stand by those. But these are publicly funded. A lot of these are publicly funded universities, and they should not be using the publicly funded money to target a minority group. And that is where we need to exert political pressure. And we need to exert it, and we need to exert it consistently. This is not a flash in the pan issue. And then lastly, reach out, whether you're an alumni, whether you're a current student, whether you're a parent of a current student, whether you're an employee. Phone calls work a lot. In addition to the mass emails, try to make a phone call and talk to people. You're not going to change opinions, but you need to, again, show the vastness and the depth of the hurt that the community has been subjected to. And then the biggest issue, what to do long term. My biggest fear is that the community is very riled up right now, but at the end of the September, this conference will happen. We will be agitated for another couple of weeks, and then we'll go back to our lives. Don't do that. This is not over. The conference being over doesn't mean that this problem is over, which is why we try to show you some of the history of Hinduphobia and how widespread it is in academia, in media. So don't go back to normalcy. Get involved and stay involved. Pick a group and get involved with them. Build and support on-campus groups like Hindu Students Council, Hindu Yuva, etc. Do it now, because you can't really jump in and say, oh, where are the Hindu students when something like this happens? Those groups need to be nurtured, support, and built up over years before they have enough strength to take on issues like this. You can continue to write to university newspapers, especially if you're an alumni. They're sort of bound to carry your voice. Now, everybody doesn't want to be an activist. It's not fun to go and tackle things negatively, and that's fine. So make sure you are out there doing positive education about Hinduism. Navratri is coming up. I cannot think of a festival that exemplifies diversity and female power more than Navratri. So make sure you talk about Navratri in your workplace, in your library, in your community. Go to your kids' school and make a presentation on Navratri. When Holi comes, do that. I know Diwali is already pretty popular and many places already do it. If they don't, make sure Diwali is covered too. And get to know your school administrators and local lawmakers. And I think that was the end of my slides.
what legal action can be done?
Good question. There is very little legal action possible. So for those of you who are not familiar, there is a law called the First Amendment. It was literally the First Amendment to the US Constitution that very thoroughly protects freedom of speech. Basically, it says Congress shall make no law to amend the freedom of, but it's been interpreted very broadly. And academia has complete freedom of speech to pretty much say anything, whether it's hurtful, that's fine. That is protected speech. So there is very little legal recourse possible. And also, legal action is extremely expensive. So I don't think our community is ready for it as well. So legal action is not the way to go, at least not at this stage. We're not ruling it out forever. But given where our community is in terms of standing together, resources, and the very strong protections that academics enjoy, that is not the most optimal option.
Deepaji, please ask your question.
Thank you, Namaste. Thank you, Pushpaji. In the Eventbrite agenda, there was explicit mention of the BJP government in India being a sponsor of Hindutva and things like that. Are you aware of any direct action or comments or action mostly from the Indian government against this conference? Is there, I mean, the power of the government of India would probably hold a sway over many such organizations, many of us here in North America. Are you aware if the Indian government is protesting against this or having contacted the US Department of State against this?
We are not. And it's not that they are not aware. I'm sure they are aware. I know several people individually have reached out to many stalwarts in the Indian government. But we are not aware of any actions that the Indian government has taken. In fact, I think recently the Indian ambassador held some kind of an interaction with various university presidents. I do not believe that there was any mention of this either. And again, I don't want to bash anybody, but unfortunately, this is not new. And I think this is why it's very important for the community to stand up for itself. We are not going to get support from if the past 20, 30 years are to be believed, this has not been an issue that the Indian government treats as a priority, no matter which administration we've had. So I think it's time to remember that, we are living here now, we are working here, this is our Karam Bhumi, and we need to advocate for ourselves. If they do intervene, that would be wonderful, but so far we are not aware of anything.
Amit ji, please go ahead.
Thank you. Pushpita ji, just to clarify, today I was reading an article in the Times of India by Avtans Kumar. He is a linguist here in North America. So he kind of mentioned in his article that because of the continuous protests by CoHNA and other, say, the HAF and all that, the sponsors of this seminar have taken down the university logos. So my question was like, was it like the university actually sponsored this particular seminar, or was it like the academics who were working in these universities put up those logos to say highlight their credentials?
Yes, excellent question. So a bit of both. So if you think about universities, they're mass, and each of them is 40 universities, means there's 40 different processes involved. But universities, a lot of them are pretty decentralized. And I think as part of our reach out, we have found a mix of reactions. So like Dalhousie and UMass and some places like that, the marketing and branding department wrote back saying that, we were not aware of this, and we have asked the organizers to remove our logo. But see, but also there are many professors within each university, right? And a professor or a department within that university could say, oh, the professor could support it individually. The professor could convince his or her department to support it. So all of that is being counted as support. But yes, they did take down we are hoping that they took down the logos, because the logo sort of implied that Stanford as a whole had said, yes, we are behind this university, or Boston University as a whole had said. But yes, of course, when I showed you the extent of Hinduphobia in academia, I mean, that was just a snapshot, right? And that was just from literally the last year. So you can imagine the depth of support they have in academia. So there's probably hundreds of professors who would be willing to support this and be able to provide their departmental backing or their individual backing. In some cases, the university has written back and said, yes, we as a university support it. So it's the whole gamut. UC Berkeley, some of them have even blatantly said, like in UC Berkeley, right? There's such a massive Indian community here. I think the problem is we're not engaged, because he basically said, we have got thousands of emails on this, but, you know, quote, we are still going to do this. So you have to just, this is why I said the most important slide is, this is the start. Don't let up. Don't go back to your comfort zone after this is over, because they have seen some pressure today. If we don't keep up and intensify the pressure, they'll be back next year with a bigger conference, worse stuff, more intense stuff. The only reason this has been increasing intensity, if you looked at the snapshots that I showed you at the start of the presentation, the only reason this has been increasing in intensity is because the community sort of goes through some bouts of outrage, but then sort of lapses back. So there is no consistent price to be paid. And so, but there is a lot of advantage they get. There is a lot of, they make their names. Audrey Trutchke has gone from being a sort of no-name professor, right? She's an associate professor at Rutgers. She would probably one of thousands of associate professors in history, but she's now an international celebrity. So there's a lot of upside to doing this and very little downside to doing this, until the community starts to use its power, right? We say we are very well off, we are very well educated. Well, let's make sure that we get some advantage from our so-called being well off in education. Right now, it's only makes us a target, and it doesn't get us much as a community. I'm not talking about benefits as an individual. I don't know if that answers your question, but yes, that's it.
We have two similar questions. One says, what is the University of Toronto's stance? And the other one asks why Indian professors are not speaking openly on this topic.
I don't know specifically what is the University of Toronto's stance. But, you know, I think I would say if you have a connection, please get together and reach out. So in certain universities, people are getting together, right? A mix of alumni, parents of current students, employees, they are banding together and seeing how do we tackle this within our university. Because again, it's not just this one talk. Even if University of Toronto withdraws its sponsorship, whatever that means, which would be great. So let's make that happen, but then let's make sure that University of Toronto gives, again, we are not saying shut down these professors or fire them. That's not going to happen. Professors have tenure, that it's just not going to happen. So, and we have to work in a very measured way, because a lot of this stuff is designed to provoke a reaction. They thrive on that. Like they put out these very provocative tweets, these very offensive things. They want to goad you into a reaction. And then they will say, look, aha, we told you, look at these angry Hindus, these fascist Hindus who are always attacking me. I tenured academic professor. I am the victim here because look at these angry Hindus attacking me. So I think it's really important, the tone with which you go after this. Very measured, be data driven. And it's fine to show pain, but you know, it's not, and you know, you can be privately angry, but unfortunately, our very normal reaction of anger is weaponized against us. So just be watchful of that. And you can, if you watch Audrey Trutchke's tweet line, for example, she almost thrives on this, and a lot of them do. They'll put out a tweet that is bound to generate angry reactions. Then they'll quickly use that to say, look, I got attacked. Again, first they get attacked, and then also we don't know who the heck is attacking, because a lot of these are Twitter handles with like that are not verified. They have like 5 followers. It doesn't matter. They get amplified. And any seasoned scholar who tries to engage with them or others gets blocked. I mean, it's almost become a badge of honor to be blocked by Audrey Trutchke and her ilk. because if you try to engage with her in a reasoned debate, which really should be part of academia, you pretty much get blocked. And your reasoned tweet will never make it as one of the pushbacks. It's always the angry tweets, the abusive ones that said, look, here's what Hindus are all about: angry people, nasty people, attacking women, attacking professors, that kind of stuff.
Dr. Mrityunjay?
And I think people were asking
Am I
some questions.
audible?
I would ask everybody to go to our website, www.CoHNA.org / dismantling Hindutva, or just go to our webpage and you'll see a campaign on the top where you can click into it. It will take you into a lot of details of what I've been talking about. You'll also find 4 action items. One is the individual letter that I mentioned that has gone to universities, 2.5 million of them. Second is the letter to lawmakers, which is US lawmakers at this point. So sign it only if you are in the United States. We'll be launching a Canadian version later. A third one about the organizations. If you are part of any organization, if you head up any kind of an organization, consider having your organization sign it. And fourth, there is a brief flyer which sort of outlines some of the problems with the speakers. You can download that and use it to share and get more information on this.
Yeah, can I go ahead?
Yes.
Hi, so I'm a professor at one of the top management institute in India. And one thing is that a lot of comments are sort of asking our fraternity that what are we doing? So basically, first of all, a lot of us are, even if they want to support, they are afraid of doing so. Maybe within the university system, there's just handful like me who would want to speak up. But even I face a challenge that if I want to speak up, there are a group of us who would want to maybe even collectively speak up. Where do we speak up? We don't have a forum and a coverage like our opponents have. So what do we do? Where do we put our views so that it reaches the masses? And let's say we do a similar kind of campaign and we sign our, let's say, collected some IIM or IIT professors signed something and handed over to some of the protest events. That doesn't get any coverage. But if similar thing happens from the opposition side, it's in the news every day.
Yes, and that is why I started my presentation by showing, it was not meant, it is a depressing presentation, but the first part to understanding the problem is understanding the scale. We are very thoroughly deplatformed, but I think it's really important to try and advocate at the ground root, at the grassroots level, because professors, students, and I think somebody is mentioning a change.org petition. There is one floating around. I would highly recommend to sign an action letter from CoHNA, HF, one of these people instead. The change.org petition, well-intentioned though it is asking Joe Biden and Modi to intervene. I'm sorry, there's a lot of stuff, much as this stuff is traumatic. I think both President Biden and Prime Minister Modi have a bigger stuff that is going on. And they are really, as I mentioned earlier, governments don't interfere in the workings of academia. So this is a fight we have to fight ourselves. So the best way is look at what other communities have done. Look at the Jewish community, for example. They have a massive network called the Hillel Network, which is a student-led organization. They have presence on many, many, many campuses. And these Hillel centers provide a safe space for Jewish students, but also others. It's not just restricted to Jewish, but they have Jewish chaplains, they have Jewish centers, people can go and congregate, collect. It provides them a voice to go talk about the positive aspects of Judaism. We need to work towards having our own Hindu centers. We don't have even one everywhere, despite our strength that, literally thousands and thousands of Hindu students attend these universities. I can't think of, I could be wrong, but I can't think of a Hindu center anywhere. We need to strengthen professors as much as possible, and we need to encourage professors to speak up as a collective. Because at the end of the day, again, I'm not pointing fingers at any one group or another. This is a community failing. But if professors have tenure, maybe they can band together, because the same problem that applies to Trotsky gives them the protection as well. So let us support and set up Hindu student groups everywhere so that we are well positioned to counter this from the inside. Our biggest battle is also that we are always talking from the outside, right? So CoHNA, HAF, none of us are at University of Toronto. Sorry? Was there a comment?
No.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, I think if I didn't get a chance, I was running out of time, but like Hindu Students Council, they're doing some amazing work in places where they have chapters, but they have very few chapters. And they are looking but in an exam, and I live in California, right? So a month ago, they had asked, before this whole thing broke, they had set up a local event and said, oh, we'd like people in the community to come join us, support us, etc. They had turnout, but not to the extent you would expect, right? So we don't support them when the going is good. They are not strong when they need to fight back. So it's not really fair then to say, hey, why aren't students reacting? Why aren't professors reacting? The onus is on the community to react and not let it drop. So we need to, that's why I said, organize, donate, fund, don't forget this, because they'll be back with something else. Temples, absolutely. Somebody is saying, can temples be used? Yes. Every institution should lend its weight in whatever way it can, because this is not about Hindutva. This is about Hinduism. See, temples, every organization, a lot of them say, we want to be apolitical. We don't want to get involved. Actually, none of us do, right? I mean, this wasn't my preferred choice either. I didn't think I would be spending time reading and talking about this. I'm not a politician. But this is not an attack on politics. And that's why we were sharing those snippets from what the speakers are saying. This is an attack on the most fundamentals of our faith and our ways, our festivals, our texts. Nothing is safe. If that is why we showed those snapshots, is that if you think you're happy just going to the temple and celebrating a few festivals, well, guess what? They're going to come after you nevertheless. If you think you're just going to chant a few mantras and be happy with it, well, guess what? They'll show you that the mantras in some reason, way, shape, or form are patriarchal or oppressive or, give pain to somebody. So it's either total surrender or band together and take a stand.
Hariharanji?
I think I see some questions. So yes, a lot of information is on the website. Please check it out. Follow our social channels, whichever one you like. Twitter, we are on Twitter. We are on Instagram. We have a YouTube channel where we put a lot of in-depth recordings. We're on Facebook. So you will find a lot of information put out there. And, for example, if you follow our Twitter channel, you'll see we retweet and support a lot of stuff from Hindu Students Council, Hindus on Campus, groups that are doing some amazing work. Follow them too. They need your support. They can't do it by themselves. And talk to your kids. I mean, a lot of you, I assume, are parents. I call this a virus, and I say it's up to us to inoculate people, to inoculate our own kids against the virus of Hinduphobia. It is a virus, it's spreading very widely and it's growing very fast. So we need to have these conversations that are not comfortable to our kids, and no age is too young. Start at elementary. Don't wait till they are in high school or college or have a good job. It's too late at that point. If you haven't talked to your child by the time they are in high school, it's too late. They are usually, by the time they're in high school, they've already been through the middle school brand propaganda that their textbooks and teachers have given them. And groups out there are basically saying Hinduism is that, this or that. Some of them may come to you with questions. Most of them will not come to you with questions. They'll just assume that you as a parent are as ashamed of these facets of Hinduism as they end up becoming. So they'll never even question it. Maybe out of respect for you, maybe because they don't care, maybe because they believe it. And they'll just grow up to not self-identify as Hindus themselves. So please proactively have discussions around every aspect of Hinduism, make them part of it, but also what we consider are the problematic aspects and tackle them head on. I mean, I come from a PR and comms background, And we always say that the first thing to do is own the problem. Don't let somebody define your faith for you. Perception is reality. If you don't define your faith for yourself, somebody else will, which goes to the other aspect of what I was saying. Make sure you're out advocating about the positive stuff. I mean, that is something I would say everybody should be doing, whether it's a casual conversation in your workplace or a presentation through your diversity channels, putting up a storyboard in your library, going to talk to it about your city council, whatever. Look for ways to go talk about the beauty that is Hinduism.
Hariharanji, please ask your question.
Yeah, see, I'm sure you know about Infinity Foundation, right? Rajamurthy has been doing this for 30 years. Of course, I support him in my own way. But the main thing he says is most of us come for the seminars, we ask a few questions and always suggest what somebody else should do. So if each one can at least make take it up with the politicians locally, or do some action or give some money to the foundation or to your organization, I think that'll be really useful. The most Hindus are very not tamasic,
Yes, absolutely. Take action. Donate your time, donate money, get involved. There is a lot of power of organization. And I can say this personally because I was like a lot of you, very frustrated, going from seminar to seminar, wondering what to do. And I think CoHNA has showed me the beauty of grassroots power. So I've connected with a lot of people who think like me, and collectively we are taking a lot of action, not academia, but on other issues, right? I'll give you a small example. Like in last year, New York, the state of New York in the US was considering passing a bill that would have taught the swastika as a hate symbol to every school child, basically saying, if you see it, call 911. So there was no nuance to it. While I think all of us totally understand the horror of the Holocaust and would be the first ones to be supportive of it, we also don't want to have our sacred symbol be taught as something that requires a call to 911. And there was no nuance in that bill. So we banded together, a bunch of volunteers, and then actually banded together with Buddhist groups, Jain groups, Native American groups, all of whom hold this symbol sacred, and did a lot of advocacy and reach out to the lawmakers and showed them the nuance of the topic. So that bill was withdrawn. Same thing happened in Maryland. And so this is the power of advocacy. Same thing, we are fighting a battle on caste being used to stereotype Hinduism, and a lot of laws being put and trying to put laws in place that would go ahead and stereotype us. So working as a group makes us stronger and more effective. But even at a much simpler level, when things like CAA happened, there was a bunch of propaganda that was being fed into 6th and 7th grades, which is why I'm saying, please talk to your children. We think a 6th grader is too young to talk about Hinduism. Well, guess what? There was a 7th grade school, there was a 7th grade in a school where 7th graders were being asked to write essays on why CAA was a violation of the principles of enlightenment and how India was no longer a democracy. This was a 7th grade class. Some parent thankfully got wind of it, probably was regularly looking at what his or her kid was doing, and had the sense to reach out. Again, as an individual, most of us won't know what to do. It's intimidating to take on a school district, a principal, whatever. Reached out to us at CoHNA, we worked with them. We went back, talked to the school, had a very good discussion with the school. The class issue was corrected, and it has now become a discussion with the school board to talk at a more strategic, in-depth level. So I'm not saying that happens all the time. We have wins, we have lots of hit misses too. But until you try, and you try as a group, it's not going to work. And I mean, by changing one school, did we change the world? Of course not. But there's still not a problem remain. But small wins make a difference, and you save one class from being Hinduphobic. They are doing this because if you can shape perceptions at a young age, it's very hard to change a perception that's been formed. So, which goes to the power of positive advocacy. If you can talk to your neighbor, to your Rotary group, to your library, to folks who know nothing about Hinduism, and give them a great story of Navratri, or how the place women have in Hinduism, or how supportive Hinduism is of gender fluidity, or how holistically Hinduism thinks about the environment, which is all so important in the current environment we live in, issues that the world cares about, issues that the younger generation cares about, issues that are perfectly aligned with Hindu values. If we are out there creating our own perception, it's harder to deposition us. But most of us sit happy. We have, I mean, I'm not blaming us. We are first generation, a lot of us. So we are straddling two worlds. We are doing jobs, we have families, we have, and we want to enjoy life like everyone else. But I think this is a fight we absolutely have to take on. There is no choice.
Suraj ji, please ask your question.
Hi, it was an excellent presentation. Thank you for this presentation. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can.
Oh, yeah. So I just, regarding the swastika as well, people in Canada, they're calling it swastika instead of calling it hook cross when all those hate things happen. But anyways, my question to you is that those who are spreading hate against Hindus, they seem to be very organized. They have a lot of misinformation on their fingertips, which they can tell us. And your presentation was very factual, and it was very well organized. Now, but for a common person like me, if I want to combat such people with facts and figures, I find myself failing because I don't have this information. So it will be really helpful for people like me if CoHNA and other great other organizations like Hindu American Foundation, etc., if you all can have some flyers on your website, so people like me can at least download it, and we can even distribute these pamphlets in restaurants and temples and other places, just to make our community more aware and stronger, and for our self-protection.
Yeah, absolutely. So take a look at our website. We do put out a lot. So if you talked about swastika, we actually have a pretty comprehensive swastika campaign. You can find it on our website with downloadable materials. If you look at I'll share a page really quickly. And I know we are running out of time, so we can end this if needed. I'm just trying to quickly. Can you guys see my screen? You should see like a Twitter feed.
We can see.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm showing you here is actually the Twitter feed of Hindu Students Council, and they put out a very good video of 5 Hindu students talking about why this conference is bad. You should go check it. This is the raw voices, but this is the CoHNA website. This is our homepage. And you'll see we absolutely agree. A lot of the issues is finding good materials, and we try to take a lot of materials to distill it down and make it into what works in the American context, because a lot of this stuff starts from India, especially in the context of, so when we talk about 370, when you talk about CAA, it's hard to use Indian articles. So we redo a lot of it. So you're seeing we're drawing it. So this is the crying Hindutva page that I had talked about. If you want to talk in your university why the Hindutva harassment field manual is a bad idea, you download that. It's an actual PDF file. It's pretty involved and detailed. If you want to understand caste, we have like a detailed, let me show you the swastika page. I'm sorry, my computer is a little slow. I'm not sure if it is working, but you can, it seems to be frozen right now. Oh yeah, okay, there it comes. So this was the swastika campaign. So these are all the organizations that supported the swastika campaign. So this is not just CoHNA being a miracle worker. But this is a booklet. You could download this, and this illustrates very clearly all the issues and why Hitler actually never called it the swastika. He called it the Hakenkreuz, which translates into the hooked cross. There are seminars. You can hear different replays of different leaders talking about it, interfaith leaders, not just Hindu leaders. So there is a Japanese monk who has made it his life mission to rescue the swastika, as he calls it. He's written a book on the topic. Here are some articles you can share. Here are some books you can check out. Similarly, our Decolonize page has a ton of stuff on caste. So we put out a lot of materials, more than I can go through here. And in fact, on the Trachki in Hinduphobia, you'll find 3 different campaigns. So maybe we could do a better job organizing it. But again, we are also as good as the volunteers we get. So join us, become a member. We are actually looking to grow our Canadian chapter too. So we are in both United States and Canada. I hope that helps. So if you look at caste, for example, a lot of detailed information. These are like paragraph by, they're long, they're paragraph by paragraph rebuttals of resolutions that people put out on caste, basically showing how complete falsehoods. We talked about Hinduphobia in academia, right? So UC Davis, Cal State, these are all massive universities in California, and they are indulging in extreme Hinduphobia. So we're trying to counteract that very factually, very calmly. There's no getting agitated, no abuses here, just dealing with facts. How to take on Wilkerson's book, some ideas here. So there's a lot of stuff I would explore all of you to, I would encourage all of you to explore it, download it, and get more comfortable with it.
We'll take one last question from Mahendra ji because we're running short of time. Mahendra ji, please go ahead.
Namaskar, Professor. You've given a very interesting and awesome presentation. I'm kind of second generation Gujarati from East Africa to UK, London. I just wanted to find out that I often wondered that despite the epic civilization Akan Bharat, which stretched from Iran, Iraq at one time to all the way to Indonesia, how come, despite Sanatana Dharma, Chanakya, the Upanishads, the Vedas, and so on, we are left floundering where the astitva, the actual existence of Hindus itself, is in question now. In India itself, if not the rest of the diaspora itself. Professor, do you have can you throw any light on this burning question as to whether the existence of Hindus itself is in question and whether we will survive? As of course, Sanatana Dharma was, is, and will be in the manifest and the unmanifest. But what is the future of Hinduism as you see it?
Yeah, that's a very deep question. I'm not a professor. I'm not just an engaged Hindu, like I hope all of you will become. A very deep question. Why, I think everyone needs to remember, there is a lot of study now coming out about intergenerational trauma and delayed reaction. So I think it behooves us to remember that we are just starting to come out of a very, very long stretch of colonization. Centuries, multiple centuries long colonization. So it takes a while to break out of all of that. And many of us don't even realize we have internalized the hate so much, which is why I started with that slide of, you've probably been exposed to Hinduphobia in your life, even if you don't think you have been. We just think this is normal. It's normal for people to make casual references on caste and sati and all these things. It's normal for people to make to joke about our murtis and things. So most of us are like, yeah, whatever. So we're so used to it. Even those of us who grew up in India, we are products of a colonial education. So it's really important for all of us to take the time, and I know time is a precious commodity in the modern world, but to really take the time to understand and dig into what is happening and to fight back in however way it is possible. I absolutely hope we will survive. We have gone through many, many worse and dark periods of the world. So I think we will survive if our community realizes that good things have to be fought for. Freedom doesn't come easily, and a faith like Hinduism, which is so all-embracing, so all-encompassing, it's so supportive yet so flexible to the needs of different people. You got to make an effort to keep it going for the next few generations. I mean, we were lucky that our ancestors, enough of them fought for it that we inherited it, and it's sort of our duty to continue that fight so that the next few generations have that same benefit. That is what motivates me, that my daughter has the same flexibility of choices that I did. And I hope that motivates all of us to do more. I mean, really, that's why I'm obviously from CoHNA, so I'm biased towards CoHNA, but take action in whatever way you feel is appropriate to your needs. And we are happy to partner with you. We are happy to work, I think one of what things we pride ourselves on is we engage with people. There's no problem too small for us. I mentioned that 7th grade, it was one class in one school in one little county, but we took it on and it became a district level issue. And so we're happy to do that. We just need people to take that fight from within, whether it's your school, whether it's your college, whether it's your university, whether it's your workplace. So we have a ton of, and that's why we spend a lot of time creating a ton of materials that people can use. And we can partner with, if you need to give you organizational support as needed.
Oh, thank you, Pushpita ji. We have run out of time, otherwise this topic is endless. Thanks for a wonderful presentation, and you have really enlightened the Hindu community, and wish you all the best to CoHNA and to all the Hindus in the world. And thank you again for coming, and thank you audience for participating. Till we'll meet again till our next presentation. Dhanyavad.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.